Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Parnell from the University of Liverpool. Over the past, today we've had a load of sessions, ton of sessions already as part of the Football Collective series. But as part of that, we've had a special around grassroots football, and we've tried to get different voices together, predominantly focused from a research perspective. But today we've got fortunate to have two people from a practitioner or industry from the sector join us as well. So I'm going to just give an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll crack on and get under some of the issues around grassroots football at the minute. We'll have about 25 minutes, 30 minutes of discussion, and we'll open up for questions. So Chad, do you mind introducing yourself first, please?
Yeah. My name's Chad Roberts. I'm currently a level 5 referee. I'm currently referee in the West Midlands, but also in the Northwest when I go back to university. I'm also on the Birmingham Youth Council, County Council, and also part of the Worley Referee Association, and a current sitting member on the Stourbridge and District Youth League, which is a youth league within the West Midlands, which has around 500 to 600 teams and about 200 referees, and I'm a current referee officer for that league.
Amazing. Hey, Chad, we haven't met before, so what are you studying and where are you studying?
I'm currently studying sport development and coaching at University of Chester.
Okay, brilliant. So we have got quite a Wirral, apart from Tom Webb, who's down in Portsmouth. It's quite a Wirral focused panel, which
very much.
Okay, welcome, Chad. Tom, because you're our resident, you and Chad are gonna be like poetry in motion today. Just want to give a bit of an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, so hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Tom Webb. I'm at the University of Portsmouth. As Dan says, I'm representing the South today, so which is always nice. It's very sunny today, which is good. So my research tends to focus around referees, match officials across sport. So obviously in football it's referees. I looked at referees at the elite level all the way down to mass participation grassroots football, with Jimmy, who's on the call as well. I won't steal his thunder in a minute because he'll obviously talk about that. So we've just submitted a manuscript for a book we've been working on related to abuse, policy implications and research, which is pulling together a lot of the work we've been doing over the past few years. And I've just recently published a paper which looked at the impact of COVID-19 on grassroots football, but predominantly referees across the spectrum, and how that might change the landscape when we start to come back to something approaching normality and sport restarting.
Brilliant, Tom. Nice to have you on. And we've also got Will. And Will, you are. I should go and get me ties really from up in the, because I used to play for the Wirral Schools FA for a number of years at different levels. So welcome. Maybe just give a bit of insight of your role and what it looks like for everyone else.
Yeah, thanks Dan. Thanks everyone. My name is Will Rowlands. I am the chairman of Wirral Schools FA, previous chairman of Merseyside County Schools FA as well. Currently working also in the Northwest with the English Schools FA in helping to restructure certain things and trying to move them into the 21st or 22nd century. I have a number of hats on a number of occasions, but pretty much that's what I spend my spare time on.
Okay, so in that role, Will, you're a volunteer in that role, yeah?
Yes, yeah, completely voluntary in my spare time whenever I do find it. There's no payment or anything like that goes on.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Will, and welcome. And Jimmy, do you introduce yourself, please, mate?
Yeah. I'm Jimmy O'Gorman. I work at Edgehill University, where I teach in sports development, coaching and management. I also teach on the mental health, sport, physical activity master's course that we have there. As Tom was alluding to, some of my research based on grassroots football has been centred upon the experience of referees, particularly around the abuse and so on that they've received. but also the policy solutions and the efficacy of policy developments, such as the Respect campaign, to try and alleviate those types of incidents occurring towards referees. So we've published work on that. I'm sure that might come up for discussion as we go through. I've also published an edited collection on sort of contemporary issues in grassroots junior football 2 or 3 years ago, which was a wide-ranging text covering from boys and girls participation experiences to the developments in terms of grassroots football structure, to female participation and role models. So there's a wide-ranging edited collection there. I think what really got me into research as well around grassroots football was my involvement with the Football Association and the Charter Standard scheme, which some of you might be aware of. Part of my PhD was evaluating that scheme for the FA back in the early 2000s, with a view to try to redevelop that as time moved on. So the efficacy of that, is something that you might have your own views on. But also, apart from the research, I've coached football at grassroots levels across adults and junior football for over 20 years, across a range of teams. So I've got a range of experiences there. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from today.
Brilliant, thanks, Jimmy. And your collection was a much needed and quality contribution. I've used it plenty of times. Jimmy, do you and Will know each other already?
No, I think I've come across Will's name. A lot of the guys that I've coached, I've been involved in Wirral Schoolboys, and who are still coach at this moment in time and involved in Wirral. I'm sure Tom's name's come up once or twice when we've been discussing the experiences and the developments and so on. Okay, brilliant. Chad, maybe we'll come to you and just talk. Maybe if you just give us about your experience. So obviously this is about grassroots football, and referees and officials are a big part of that. It'd be great just to have a bit of insight. What are some of the headline issues pre-COVID that referees and officials were facing in the game from your experience, please?
For my past about 5 years now, experience of grassroots football is, I think, like what Tom highlighted most of his work is the abuse has become less verbal and a lot more physical. There's a lot more reports now about physical abuse occurring, referees getting punched, mass assaults on a referee, which was shown in the media last year. I've had one instance of a death threat towards myself. That's when I think I was about 16 or 17 years old at that point, on a pitch with 22 grown men. There's myself and having a player what I've just sent off, slitting his throat and saying, "I'm watching until after the game, I'm going to kill you." So I think that's one of the big main issues in post-COVID refereeing is the threat of abuse and most likely physical harm.
And how seriously do you take that Chad? Because obviously we'll have experience in different parts of the grassroots game where lots of things are said, and sometimes people pass it off as it's the heat of the moment of the game, and that people, some would argue in certain aspects of the grassroots game that I've certainly been involved in men's footy, is that there's a lot of that as part of almost not the foreplay, the right word, but the gamesmanship. So in terms of that for you, what is the feelings when some of those things happen, and how serious is it? And obviously I'm not talking about your particular case, but you can see there's blurred and that. There's some blurred examples and that kind of stuff. What's your take on it?
You can kind of understand the threat. As referees, you'll be a good judge of character, full stop. Because sometimes players are trying to con you for decisions, or diving this, that, and the other. So you've got to be a good judge of character. And it seems that the threats are a lot more likely to happen at a Sunday morning level. Semi-professional on a Saturday afternoon where a referee, players getting paid and stuff like that. Them kind of threats are a bit more trying to get under your skin and trying to get a decision out of you, compared to a Sunday morning where, I'm not going to generalise all Sunday morning players, but most of them got something in the system from the night before. or still drunk from the night before, and their behaviour can be influenced by that, and that's a big thing in your brain on a Sunday morning. Is some of these players are not doing this for fun, are doing this for fun, but at the end of the day, it's a lot more than just passion for them. It's do or die.
Okay, really interesting. We'll come back to each other about what needs to be done to tackle some of that. But those experiences, Tom, you've been working in this area now for over a decade. You know, when you hear that kind of thing, Tom, you know, what does it mean to you as a scholar trying to shed light on this area and raise awareness and do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, what Chad's describing is quite common. Particularly in football in England, actually. I mentioned the book that both Jimmy and I are involved with, and you know, some of the experiences that the referees shared with us and match officials. We look at other sports in there and across different countries are really quite shocking when you read it, when you go through the accounts. You know, we've got accounts in there of people talking about. Chad's mentioned, you know, the threats, people coming onto the pitch with knives and spectators and things like that. And it's, you know, you're reading that and you're thinking, you know, how has it got to this? You know, that's sort of the difficult thing. It is quite difficult to read some of it. And I think particularly in England, we've tried to address it. You know, the respect program, I think a lot of people find it quite easy to knock. Certainly the work we've done, it's varied. It's not all positive. It's not all negative. There's been some aspects that have been well received and worked well, and there have been others that perhaps haven't delivered what the FA hoped. And that also varies from county FA to county FA as well. You know, and because each region is different, each county is different, has different challenges. If you're looking at somewhere like Cornwall, for example, completely different geographically to around London and places like that. So you're dealing with very different challenges at a sort of local level. And I think that's one of the issues and one of the challenges for the FA is how do we deal with that given the differences geographically and given the issues that might differ from county to county. What we did see though is that the frequency of abuse in England is much higher than it is in other countries. So I did a UEFA funded project which we published this year, some of the findings from which was with the French and Dutch FA as well. And actually the numbers in terms of officials, percentages and things like that were abused weren't that different, but it was how often they received some form of abuse. And it's more prevalent in England in terms of that frequency than it is in France and the Netherlands. So every game, every couple of games is much more likely to happen in England. Obviously more verbal than physical, but as Chad says, he's seen a rise in that physical abuse. And we had almost 20% of referees saying they'd had some form of physical abuse. Now, when you think we've got about 28,000 referees, if you sort of take that to that number, then that's a pretty high number that we're talking about. So yeah, it is a real concern. The FA are trying to tackle it, but it goes back a long time. It's not a recent occurrence. We've published historically on some of the issues as well. We're looking at, you know, even before codification in 1863, there were problems with gamblers and things like that. So it's not new. It's developed over a long period of time, and it isn't unique to football either. Other sports are also experiencing some of those problems, which again Jimmy and I and Jamie and Mike talk about in the forthcoming book as well. So yeah, as a scholar looking at this area, and Jimmy talked about policy implications, what we want to start to think about is, okay, what can we learn from other countries? What can we learn from other sports? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And start to really use that to consider how we might move forward. And COVID-19 could be part of that answer as well. You know, it gives us a chance to think about the environment, to think about how we want football to look, not just for referees, but generally that playing area in grassroots football around the pitch. How do we want it to be? Do we want to see a positive environment? If we do, how are we going to do it? You know, and I think it gives us that chance. It's not all negative. We can think about that.
Okay, Okay, brilliant. Well, I think we do have to like make that case. Obviously, we're here to talk about the issues, but we will have positive stuff as well. How do we need to work out stuff that has worked that we've done already, and also work out new strategies to how to improve things. But some of the things we mentioned there, we come over to you, Will. Obviously, we talked about the respect campaign, and my take on that is that it seems to have quietened down quite a bit now and fizzled out. What is your take on some of these things that you've seen, Will? And what is going on now to try and you've got quite an influential role. What is going on now to try and influence behaviours and environments around our grassroots game at the minute? Will, just on mute.
Sorry. Yes, certainly within the school's football setting, from my point of view, we try and make sure that we have that environment that just sets an example, and that comes from strong leadership first and foremost. And we're lucky that within not only the Wirral but Merseyside, we have got some very strong leaders who, first and foremost, don't take any abuse or anything like that. Now, in terms of the FA, in terms of where things are at, it's still out there. The abuse is still happening, and match officials is actually something that I'm also very keen on helping, because I've partnered with Wirral District FA and their referee development department, who supply our match officials on a weekly basis. So we've partnered with them for the past couple of years in order to ensure that we can provide them with a good level of officiating, good standard, and they can get out of it. But that's incumbent on us, making sure the environment's right for them. But from my point of view, it still comes down to that leadership aspect of adults, ensuring that they follow, their respect aspect. Is the campaign, has it watered down? Yeah, I think it has. But at the same time, I think it probably needs a bit of a reboot. But I think it needs a reboot in a big way, to try and sort of put everything back into context. And as Tom said, with COVID-19, almost use it as a reset. And say, right, let's start when this all starts again. Let's put into play. This is how we want it to look. Rather than just sort of going back to what did work or didn't work previously.
Can I ask on that then, Will? Because the majority of people in the game, especially the grassroots game, are volunteering their time, and I'm part of that with the Shafts. Teams there, leaving like maybe the respect stuff aside. Now, what were the issues that you were facing in the game? And if you do talk about a reset, what you're resetting and what you expected to, what would you like to be dealt with when we do come back? What does it look like?
Oh yeah, good question. I think from what was happening, I think it was just the level of abuse. Well, towards match officials was one. That was poor. And I'll hold my hands up. Some of our lads were not angels as much as opposition, etc. And we had to stamp down as quickly and effectively on that. In terms of what could change, I mean, that's I think the $1 million question, isn't it? Because it's all about attitudes and behaviours, and it's how you influence, your match day. Either before you get there and during as well as after. And do you bring about a message that you can try and get across to everyone that they take away, that gets into their psyche to develop from there.
Okay, brilliant. Jimmy, I'm interested in what are if you had to, just pre-COVID, if you had to make a list, I'll put you on the spot a bit. What are the big issues that you found from your research and your practical industry experience that we experience in grassroots football at the minute?
Tough question, that Dan. Yeah, I think if there's a lot of wide-ranging issues that I think are underexplored in terms of grassroots, and that's from a range of stakeholders that not just require investigating from an academic sense, but also in terms of action from those who are in charge of grassroots football. Now, granted, a lot of people in positions of responsibility in grassroots football are volunteers themselves, and that is one of the key issues for me. Is that people are investing a lot of their time and efforts and so on voluntarily, on top of a day job and so on, and to try to provide sort of effective provision, and that is of benefit to all stakeholders is quite difficult. So that's quite a broad ranging thing that I'm just mentioning. But I think for me, what I think we need a bit more research on is the actual experience of the children themselves, what they experience as part of like the match day or training or whatever that might be, and what they feel are what they feel are the most enjoyable things about football, their motivations for being part of grassroots football. I think we can probably guess at some of those things, but there's not really any research which is pointing towards what it is that gets them involved, what it is that keeps them participating and motivated, what are the things they don't particularly like maybe in the grassroots football environment. And that's what one of the papers in that editor collection was trying to move towards, and hopefully engender sort of future research in that area. But I also wonder, I come back a little bit towards Tom's point as well. And the abuse of officials is something that hasn't gone away, and it's still prevalent, particularly at grassroots. A lot of that comes from coaches, parents, and there's then can influence the children as well. But I do wonder, from an academic sense, whether the research that myself and Tom have been involved in, it's trying to sort of expose this, and bring to life the experiences of referees. And we all agree that the abuse referees receive, and it could be abuse we've seen children receive as well. When I say abuse, verbal abuse from parents and so on, it's sort of, I want to say accepted, but it's been something that is part of the game. And I just wonder whether we need to have a more of a critical approach to investigating these issues with a view to changing. We are trying to change those views through our exploratory research, if you like, people's experiences and so on. But just wonder whether there needs to be a more politically critical approach towards it, to try and put pressure upon those organisations and stakeholders to realise what it is that they are doing in the grassroots environment that might be of damage to the key stakeholders.
Jim, I mean, I'm interested in picking up on this idea of the volunteers involved in the game, because these are ultimately going to impact the experience that many children have, and also impact the experience that officials will have too. So, do you have any concerns about this volunteer workforce almost returning to work, and do you have any fears about the children actually returning to play? And do you see any concerns there? So, I mean, my team, I've got them decorating rocks and bringing them together. I've got them activities and runs and Strava groups and all this kind of rubbish to keep them occupied on tap. Not every manager, not every coach is going to do that in the spare time. So are we going to lose coaches? Are we going to lose players? And, what's your feelings on that?
Possibly. I think the players is probably most concern, really. I'm just thinking, in terms of practical experience again, the group I coach now are a bit of an older group, and it's, to want a better purpose, you can leave them to their own devices a little bit, but to the younger ones, there's more younger ones playing, there's more younger ones involved. And I'm also concerned more, and my role at the club as well as also a child welfare officer, and those kids that we know who are in more vulnerable positions going into this lockdown, they're the ones who've lost contact with the most. They're the ones that we don't have any communication with, direct communication with. So we might be doing simple things to yourself there in terms of giving exercises out, and give Danny Holmes a plug on here in his EPD, Elite Player Developments, and sending those exercises out for our kids to do and keep them occupied. But it's the ones who are most vulnerable, parents who haven't got access to resources and finances and so on, that might not be active on these WhatsApp groups and so on. And they're the kids that you sort of most worry about now, and then maybe coming back once this lockdown starts to ease up. So
interesting. I think that's a massive issue, that requires attention, probably sooner rather than later. But I guess we're going to see the outcomes of some of this a little bit later. I'm also conscious of like the role of e-gaming and gaming and esports that might take some of these kids and give them opportunities to connect during this time with their friends when they are in lockdown. It might keep them in new consumption habits into the future. Chad, you come from, of course, referees are paid, but around that, the reality is there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of voluntary work that goes in around organising and leading some of these types of organisations. Is there any thoughts from you in terms of like that workforce and what might happen during this period?
Yeah, I think the most vital period of any time in the season is the off season, because many people find new things to enjoy, especially referees. Referees sometimes get the image of doing it for the money, but if you did it for the money, you'd be out of pocket, really. There's been many Saturdays where I've left my uni accommodation on my home at 10 and 11 o'clock and haven't got back till 6, 7, even 8 sometimes PM, and I've only been paid £25 for that time complete. So the workforce for referees is very small as it is. There should be, I personally think there should be more of a push to see that the players who retire at the age of 34, 35 normally, they should be trying to push into either a coach in place or a referee in place within the workforce. We should try and retain the players into a different role within football. I was talking to my referee association last night, and one of the referees is suffering with a bad knee, and we're trying to retain him and bring him back as a mentor. So instead of just casting him out to the wall to find a new hobby or something he can enjoy, we've asked him to come back and think about becoming a mentor for younger referees or even older referees, because mentors at the moment are seen only as a place for younger referees to be. We're starting to believe with different research that even the older referees are in need of mentorship or some kind of leadership.
Brilliant. Tom, just based on what Chad said there, just drawing on some of your experience from different countries, different sports, is there any like recommendations or insight that you could give from that might help prepare organisations involved in referees and officials support the workforce during this period, but also help prepare them to come back?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is it's not an English problem on its own. I presented at UEFA just before Christmas to all the European FAs about recruitment and retention, and 95% of those FAs have got problems in terms of either recruiting referees in the first place or retaining them once they've got them. And most of them said it's that first 2 years it's the real issue. If you're in after 2 years, you'll probably stay in for a prolonged period of time. So alongside abuse, and we talk about abuse as though that's the only issue. It's not. It is a big problem, and it is a contributory factor to why referees might leave or discontinue. But Chad talked about there the support network. He's talking about the Referees Association, and those formal and informal support networks are essential around referees, particularly when they first start, because I think we mentioned right at the start of the call, and Chad said, you might be on a pitch with, 30 to 40 adults around you and you. And if that situation goes badly, and if you make decisions that the players don't like, or it's a Sunday morning and they might have been out the night before or something like that, you're very isolated, and it's quite a lonely place to be. Now, the problem then is what support have we got around those people to help them if something goes wrong? And I think that's where sometimes there's a problem. It's looking at that support network around them, and that can be formal, can be through the County FA, through the Referees Association, and it can be informal through WhatsApp groups, through correspondence with other referees that you might have met on training events and things like that. But all of that is really important to try and retain them. one of the other problems we found is, and this again is not just related to England and it's not just related to football, is the disciplinary procedures, particularly at lower levels when referees or match officials go through those disciplinary procedures. There are, and it relates to support, but issues around communication, around the actual process. If it gets to a disciplinary hearing, that is us v them, the referees feel isolated in that situation, and things like that, and it's not necessarily set up to support them. So I think all these things are considerations, and when what we're talking about now is that we've got an extended break. Normally every season, as Chav mentioned, you have the off season. What we've got now is almost an off season followed by another off season. And the danger is that a lot of those people that might have experienced some of these issues, we're talking about match officials, but it also extends to players as well, and possibly coaches. Any of those issues, it gives them a longer time period without football, without sport, where they could think, well, I can do other things with my time. Why am I, if I'm a referee and I've been abused recently or just before the break, why am I going to go back? What support have I got to help me? And that's the danger, I think, that we might actually see a bigger dropout than we normally would. Every season, you see a number that don't come back. The FA generally, approximately, recruits about 7,000 referees a year and loses about 7,000 referees a year across the country. That varies slightly, but roughly that's about where we're at. Now, the danger is if that tips and we lose more than we recruit, which has happened over the last few years, we did have over 30,000 referees. We're now down to 28,000. If it continues like that, then there's more fixtures without referees. There's fewer games that can take place. It has a knock-on effect. And so I think we've got to be really careful in terms of that. That support network for me is really essential around referees, but also players. And Jimmy mentioned, young players, vulnerable players. The same goes for those individuals as well. Anyone that's in that sort of situation where they might be vulnerable, they might be isolated, they might need that support. That support is really important.
Okay, brilliant. Well, coming to you, Tom talked about the importance of relationships and networks of support. How has the pandemic impacted your role, and how have you maintained connection during that period with coaches, players, and different stakeholders within your network?
Yeah, so, the thing about playing district football is that obviously players belong to a lot of other clubs, a lot of other teams, etc. So what I've actually done is I've given almost everyone a clean break. Right, I know a lot of other clubs, a lot of other teams will have set up all sorts of groups, Zoom chats, Strava, etc., etc. I made a conscious decision early on that actually, we'll check in with parents and players every now and again, but we won't do anything formally, because for me, I want them to use this time as best possible, to recuperate, to relax, to rest, recover, etc. So that when they come back, they are hopefully itching to, and ready to go. That's not to say that what other clubs and teams have done is wrong. Far from it. That's just the conscious decision I made. In terms of keeping in touch with our coaches, I do that on a weekly basis. We have, little quizzes, every week, every other week, just to keep, it all light-hearted. We'll just have a quick check-in for 10 minutes, as to where things are at in terms of what conversations they may have had with parents and players that I'm not aware of. And in terms of the support networks, again, going back to what I said before about partnering with Wirral District FA and their referees department, I also check in with the referees that have been signed to our pool, and just have a little chat with them, see how they're doing, because predominantly they are all young referees. They're aged between 16 and about 22. So it's just about making sure they feel happy, and if I can be of any assistance to them, I certainly will do. And then if I can get them assistance, and move it along from there. Okay,
brilliant. Okay, so in in a couple of minutes, I'm going to open up for questions, and I'm also going to ask Jimmy what research ideas he thinks we should explore in the, post-COVID when we're back. But just maybe a quick one, and we'll start off with Chad. Maybe just give me one thing that you're really looking forward to getting back to when we get out of this. So there is some positives and not just all the issues. So what thing we'll go Chad, Tom, Will, and then we'll round it off with Jimmy.
The most thing I'm looking forward to really is not refereeing in general, but I'm currently working with Birmingham County FA as one of their youth council members, and we're producing a whole new structure to our mentor programme. And this programme's taken us 3 to 6 months just to structure itself, let alone produce and roll out. So I'm looking forward to getting that into shape, and hopefully come whenever we do start back, we can start rolling it out towards the county FA and seeing if we do have any kind of impact on retention levels and recruitment levels across the county, and then hopefully we might be able to show it to some other county FAs and have a bigger impact on football in general.
Thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, my little boy plays, so he's 11, and I coach his team. So I'm looking forward to getting back doing that, which, to be honest, I was quite, when COVID sort of hit, it's sort of a bit getting towards the end of the youth season, you're quite tired and things like that. We had a lot of work, obviously, and moving to online and things. You're like, oh, it's nice to have a little break. And then, after a couple of weeks, you're like, I could do with going back now, really. You miss the training sessions, you miss, the Saturday mornings and that sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to getting back, and he's climbing the walls in our house at the moment. So he definitely needs to be back playing football, I think.
I'm with you. Will?
Simply put, the sound of that referee's first whistle, because then we know it's definitely back.
Love it. Jimmy?
Yeah, I've experienced some of the same things that you guys are mentioning there. I'm wanting to get back out there and coaching and playing again and those type of things. But when I come back to Dan's point about research, and I'm mindful of this as well when we're keen to be getting back to what we say is normality or whatever that might be. And I'm conscious of people that I'm in touch with who want to come back, want the kids to go back to be playing football, but they've got a lot of concerns over the current situation, or where lockdown might begin to ease, and you might start to get kids being allowed to go back to school, allowed to be going back to participating in sport. There's a lot of uncertainty around this disease still, and a bit of fear and anxiety. So I just wonder whether, there's research that might need doing when we get back to playing football, but is there not a need for us to be thinking about, well, what are people expecting? And I don't say people, a range of stakeholders, what are they expected to come back to? What are they wanting to happen when they go back to participate in football? What would they feel would be safe grounds for them to, and their kids and themselves, to get back involved in grassroots football? Because we've got to remember that, people, and like Tom alluded to before, referees being isolated and on their own and so on. Well, grassroots environments is something that isn't as, regulated or, as overseen by the governing bodies or media or so on. And so there won't be all these precautions and tests in place for people to be playing at the grassroots level. So I just wonder whether there's something that could be done now to try and inform a future approach. It might, whether it's a bit too late in the day, I don't know.
Probably just the wrong government.
Well, I was trying to leave a political persuasion outside, Dan, yet, but I think if there was a greater sense of clarity and so on, that would give people a greater steer on what they feel would be acceptable in terms of returning back to some kind of grassroots participation. Because I do get the feeling that some parents are going to want the kids to get back and straight back into it, and there's going to be parents who are going to hold the kids back. There's going to be parents who want to go straight back into grassroots football for a number of reasons. So I do wonder whether some kind of large-scale research across all the stakeholders in grassroots football, trying to investigate some some idea about what it is they would like to see happen in terms of the return, whatever their involvement might be. And that includes the kids themselves, and giving the kids a voice might help sort of shape some decisions. I know it's talking a bit probably idealistically, but I just wonder whether that's something we could do now.
It hasn't been mentioned, Jimmy, has it? Really, if we're looking at football, the return of football generally, everything's about the Premier League in England. Everything's about Project Restart. Very little, other than Robbie Savage asking a question about grassroots football a few days ago, really hasn't been mentioned. And they didn't answer that. So the environment at the moment isn't conducive to contact sports, rugby, football, things like that. It's very difficult to see how it's going to move towards that, given the guidance from the government, or whatever we term that guidance to be. But it's not clear how we can start to move towards grassroots sport returning, really. I think that's concerning. We do need some sort of guidance.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely brilliant question, Jimmy. And ultimately, we realise now exactly where sport is on community sport is on the government priority list. We knew where it was, and it's clear in the way it's treated. Other countries such as Denmark are having these conversations. They've been having the return to elite sport and return to recreational sport at the same level. So we're just we're all in the same bed, but dreaming different dreams, I think, when it comes to football, certainly from a government policy perspective. Okay, we're open for questions. Thanks so much for that insight. Let's go. Jonathan, do you want to start us off?
Hi, Dan. I think there's somebody else who's just in there before me in the forum.
Anis, do you want to kick us off then? Didn't see that. Can't hear you, Anis.
How about now?
Brilliant.
Just on a year-by-year basis, I have, when friendlies are being organised for my team, I've got countless referees in my phone book, like Dan Ref, Will Ref, and they're in there. And year by year, I send out a mass text to say, you could referees our games that are being organised for pre-season. And it seems like there's more and more that are no longer refereeing. So, the conversation strikes up, and you ask, what are the reasons for why they're not refereeing, or how comes they packed it in? And a lot of them have said to me that it's because of the constant rule changes. Whether it's the sin bin rule or offside changing, the double jeopardy with red cards, and they felt too much pressure perhaps to implement new changes year by year that took the enjoyment of refereeing away from them. And that's what it was for them, part of being able to stay in the game that they either played or were coaching and wanting to try something else. So from a referee's perspective, what could be done to support that referee experience? Because they are very much part of the game, as much as the players, as much as the coaches. So what is done about their experience and their enjoyment to keep those referees in the game and encourage those retiring players from a grassroots level, as Chad was describing earlier, to then go on and become a referee?
So I think the changes what have been made over the last couple of years have been productive regarding some of the rules, well, laws, shall we say. Some of the law changes this year might be a bit counterproductive regarding handball and stuff. It does make the referees' job a lot harder when laws are not black and white, and the enjoyment, like you said, just will go out of it because a lot more decisions will be able to be contested. Just put a fact out there, I think the average age of the Premier League referee is about 43. There's only been 2 referees who've made a debut at Premier League level before the ages of 32 since Premier League's been around. I think that's a massive impact on why players don't want to get into refereeing, because there's no real clear structural pathway that anybody outside of refereeing can see. Many people don't even understand the levels of refereeing, let alone the pathway. But also the fact that it takes so long to get up the steps of the ladder is also a big, massive reason why many people take 2 years and drop out, because they're going nowhere at a speed that they want to. Whereas players can play a Sunday morning game, get scouted for a Saturday morning game, and then within 2 to 5 years playing at the highest level, like Jamie Vardy did. Whereas for a referee to make that progress, it's a good nearly 10 years.
Thanks, Chad. Just to add on to that, sorry, what about the referees that aren't interested in that pathway? What about the ones that are happy at the levels? They want to go to one facility hub and just ref there over a Saturday and Sunday. What can be done to support their experience, or is there pressure on that pathway to exist for them? Like, you get in and you have to move up.
I think the biggest issue about that kind of situation is what Tom was highlighting in most of his work. That really,
Dad, I struggling to hear this.
sorry, can you hear me now? I think one of the most important parts of that is support networks. They need to be enhanced and upgraded. Many referees, especially older referees from the age of 30 plus, really struggle to find a support network out there what fits their needs, as most of the mentorships require a referee to go up that pathway that we was talking about earlier, whereas many older referees just want a bit of advice on a Sunday morning game, and that's probably one of the reasons why many players don't go into refereeing.
Okay, great. Let's go to Jonathan.
Hi, thanks for that. Really enjoyed listening to all your perspectives on issues facing referees. Slightly worried in some respects. I actually qualified as a ref during lockdown, rather bizarrely, because I'm in Wales and the Football Association of Wales had various deals on for doing some of their referee courses. So I'm qualified to referee junior matches, and I've done the relevant number of hours in a course and passed the exam for adult matches and just need to attend a sort of one-day training event. And I'm kind of ready to be kind of thrown in theory. What do you think, somebody in my position, the best thing to do in terms of being ready for what awaits on the field and challenging situations, whether that's from players, managers, and so on? What do you think are the best things that somebody who's not got the real life experience, well, I mean, apart from being like a club linesman in games, what do you think the best ways of preparing for that sort of challenge is?
I think there's a number of ways you could do that, John. I think it's firstly great that you've qualified. It's a shame that it's happened now, I suppose. So, but I think talking about this, Chad was talking about the support and things that shouldn't be underestimated. Hopefully, if you'll have a county FA, but obviously you'll have a referees association as well. Now, within those structures, hopefully you can find a mentor. Chad's talking about the development of the program there in Birmingham and around that area. The experience is certainly the research that we've done is that it sounds great where Chad is and what he's involved with. That isn't always the case. It's not always as structured as that. And it does vary from place to place, county to county, RA to RA. So I think it's first of all finding those contacts, thinking about how you might look at formal or even informal mentoring if there's no structure, because you've also got to think that we're talking about declining referee numbers. That means it's more and more difficult to find a mentor for these new referees and things, and there's a time demand on people. So it's about building those support networks. Now, certainly some of the work we've done, the research is telling us that that's harder for younger people because they might not necessarily have the life skills. They might not know where to go to find that information. They might not be confident enough in a social situation to go out and get it. And certainly, perhaps if you qualify a bit later in life or a bit older rather than sort of 14, 15, 16, which is pretty young, then you might have a bit more in terms of your life skill to be able to go and find those networks. So I think that would be, for me, talking from a research perspective, looking at the work we've done, those support networks are crucial, particularly when you do those first games, and there'll be things that go well and things that don't go as well as you hoped, and it's having those people to talk to lean on, to discuss some of those issues with.
I totally agree, Tom.
Sorry. Happy with that, John, yet?
Yeah, thanks. That's really useful. Thanks.
Brilliant. Danny?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Afternoon, everyone. Some really interesting insights there in terms of some of the issues going on in the grassroots game at the moment. I was thinking about what you were talking about towards the end of the session when you were saying about the lack of clarity at the moment for how the grassroots game might return. And I suppose I want to put forward a question that's or might be a bit of a provocation. And obviously at the moment, elite football, professional football is looking to come back behind closed doors. Do you think it'd be workable? Do you think, or would you even advocate that we introduce the grassroots game, for example, where players and managers only were allowed to attend facilities and you didn't allow parents and anyone to watch? Might that be a way forward, or would you just think that would create more problems than it would solve?
Well, from my aspect, Dan, I think it's obviously easier to work behind closed doors at the grassroots level because there's not that many people that would attend games normally anyway. But you have to then start looking at things from a safeguarding point of view. If you're having kids and managers only at games, you've got to look at all safeguarding, risk assessments, etc. from that side of things. The other aspect as well is, would parents be happy with that? I mean, I know a number of our parents that they wouldn't be happy. Now, would they be unhappy enough to turn around to their little Johnny and say, right, well, you're not going to football? I doubt it, but I think that they would be very, they'd voice their displeasure, quite a bit. But at the same time, if everyone's in the same boat and that's the only way forward to get fixtures going again, then it's a possibility. I mean, from my point of view, it'd be great because I think the kids would probably enjoy it a little bit more, and certainly the referees would, and probably the coaches. But is that taking away from the experience, or is it adding to it? I'm not sure. I mean, I have, over certain instances in the past, I have, thought about things like silent sidelines and banning parents due to, various things that have gone on. But the other side of it is how do you police it?
Yeah.
They're my thoughts.
I'm just gonna step in quick there, Dan, because it's a great question. And I've got a response to it as well, but I'm going to hold it because I'm conscious of time. So maybe those that are on the panel can give Dan, stick around for the next session, give Dan a message with their response. Is that all right, Dan?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, of course.
Just conscious of time and giving the guys a bit of a breather before the next session starts. On behalf of the football collective, thank you for everyone who's just joined in and participated and asked questions, made comments. On behalf of myself, thank you so much for the guys that have stepped forward via our call on Twitter. Tom, Will, Chad, and Jimmy. It's great to have a brilliant mix of sector and people coaching and people refereeing. Alongside with the academic stuff, so it means a lot. I think we've got a great flavour in there, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah.